Excellencies, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, most of the time we do not think about electricity, and that is the point of reliable infrastructure. When it works, it disappears from view. But if we are to understand where we stand today, we must look back. So I will start in the early 1900s, when Cambodia began introducing electricity for municipal function in Phnom Penh. The system then was privately owned, operated under French authority, and over time extended to a handful of provincial towns. Narrow in scope, it was the beginning of a national infrastructure that would expand, collapse, and eventually be rebuilt over the next century. By the 1920s, provincial centers such as Kampot were requesting modest supplies, around 75 kilowatts for public lighting and ventilation. In Phnom Penh, demand was slightly higher due to population density and administrative activity, but actual supply remained limited and unreliable. Today, Kampot's demand stands at around 50 megawatts, an increase by a factor of 666, while Phnom Penh's has grown to approximately 1,683 megawatts, reflecting the scale of development since those early years. In Takao, during this early period, electrification was delayed not by finance or policy, but by something more basic: timber. There was a shortage of adequately sized wood for electricity poles, and road access remained poor. By 1958, Cambodia brought its electricity sector under national control. Electricity de Cambodia, known as EDC today, was established following the state acquisition of two French utility firms. That same year, King Norodom Sihanouk initiated a diplomatic effort that secured support from 12 countries to fund Kiridom 1, the country's first hydropower plant, which is running today. It produced 12 megawatts for Phnom Penh, enough to lower tariffs, and for the first time, prompt some factories to abandon their private diesel generators and connect to the national grid. To manage future hydropower development, the government created a national body focused on large-scale projects, and feasibility studies began in several provinces, supported by international partners. Yet, the technical capacity to build and operate this new infrastructure remained very limited. So in the 60s, Cambodia signed an agreement with France to establish a professional training center in Phnom Penh. It provided laboratories, workshops, and practical instructions, a step toward building domestic expertise. It was a decisive decade. For the first time, energy policy, engineering training, and international diplomacy were part of the same national conversation. That momentum was brutally interrupted. During the Khmer Rouge era, power stations were dismantled. The grid collapsed, and electricity, like so much else, disappeared. Those events, though now approaching their 50th anniversary, still remain in living memory for some of us in this room today. Following the end of the period, EDC was re-established, and at the time, there was no functioning economy and no power grid to speak of. Diesel generators were patched together. Electricity, where it existed, came from isolated systems. In Phnom Penh, just 20 megawatts, barely, could be generated, and even that was unreliable. Staff that they managed to bring into EDC were not paid in currency, not in dollars, not in reals, but in kind, with rice, fish, or kerosene. That's their salaries. And so the bills began again. It was common throughout the 80s and 90s that electricity was rationed. In the capital, right here, households were assigned daily shifts, 6 hours at a time, as supply often fell short of demand. Outside the cities, most of the country remained in darkness. In Posat, my hometown, where I grew up, we lit our home with fish fat. For years, there was no electricity. When the power did come on, it lasted roughly about 3 hours a day. So we adjusted our lives around this kind of electricity supply. Real progress began much later. When Samdech Akek Mahasenaparati Tengcho Hun Sen implemented the win-win policy and the last of the armed conflict was dismantled, it gave the country something essential, the ability to plan. Without peace, there would be no grid, no serious investment, and no way to think in terms of decades instead of weeks. And this is where Cambodia's swift journey to electrification proceeded. Peace enabled planning. Translating that into reliable, affordable electricity required time, investment, and institutional strengthening. When I was appointed to lead EDC in 2008, the institution was under serious financial strain. Arrears, especially public arrears, had piled up, and fuel suppliers were refusing to deliver. Theft of electricity had risen above 13% of the annual output, a major waste. Tariffs were deeply uneven across the country, with Phnom Penh paying just 350 reals per kilowatt hour, while rural provinces paid as much as $1.50. A dollar being more than 4,000 reals, $1.50 is like 6,000 real plus. The system was simply unjust, and it was unsustainable. We began by reforming the tariff structures to restore fairness, to make sure that those who had the least weren't paying the most. We overhauled recruitment and introduced competitive exams. Alongside this, we invested in training. The Vocational Center for EDC was expanded into the Institute of Electrical Sciences, offering technical degrees and scholarships, including for students who might otherwise have been excluded, especially women. At the same time, we introduced a living wage. It was a basic principle. If we expected professionalism and public service, then we had to make it possible for staff to support a family with dignity. For us, that was the real start of institutional renewal, restoring morale, accountability, and trust. The work was slow, and there was little ceremony to it. But somewhere between policy and payroll, something began to shift. The work of building a power system, of course, is technical. But the effort behind it, the choices, the failures, the persistence is all deeply human. Too much of that story risks being forgotten, which is why I am proud to share that we have written a book that will be launched this morning. It brings together what might otherwise have been lost, perhaps for good. Writing the book was quite a challenge and took several years. Some records were retrieved from archives in France, reconstructed from what people remembered or taken from what few records remains. The result is a legacy document that brings together fragments of our history, highlighting important milestones and the shared effort behind them. It reflects the work of our government, our late king, and teams across EDC, the Electricity Authority of Cambodia, the Ministry of Economy and Finance, the Ministry of Mines and Energy. It includes the contribution of our valued development partners, many of whom are present here today, our private sector partners, our neighbors, engineers, and the many communities who sustain progress at the local level. I now want to turn to a part of the system that few outside the sector may know well, but which has had a profound impact on how and where electricity is delivered in this country. And that is the Rural Electrification Funds, known in short as REF. In the early 2000s, around 6%, only 6% of rural households in Cambodia were connected to the national grid. Others relied on battery charging, often through informal generator stations, paying from 2,000 reals up to 10,000 reals just for a few hours of power. And that was the cost of living without access. And it was paid disproportionately by the poorest of the poor in this country. In 2004, under the guidance of His Excellency Sam, and with the support from the World Bank and the royal government, the REF was created. Through the Rural Electrification and Transmission Project known as RETP, bringing renewable energy into rural planning ahead of global trends. Once RETP closed, and under a new royal decree, REF was integrated into EDC, not as a project, but as a permanent department. It became a non-profit unit within the institution, with a clear mandate to extend the grid, support rural providers, today known as Rural Electricity Enterprises or REEs, and make sure that even those beyond the reach of transmission lines could access powers through solar and micro-scale systems. National development must mean national inclusion. And while most people associate EDC with their monthly electricity bill, what they may not realize is that part of the bill has gone into REF, supporting grid expansion and subsidizing electricity programs in places that would otherwise be left behind. From that 6% in the early 2000s, as Dr. Julsa already shared, we now have over 95% household coverage. Connections, which is the film and the exhibition that we will showcase today, tells some of the stories of how, and over 2 decades, we moved Cambodia from fragmented mini-grids and expensive diesel generator to near universal coverage. Some of the stories are from floating villages powered by solar, some from border areas where cables had to be threaded through forests and rice fields. Others show how REF's Power to the Poor program allowed even the lowest income household to join the grid. Behind each story is a policy, a program, and a person whose life changed because of it. In closing, we express our gratitude to Samdech Akek Mahasana Paredejo Hun Sen, whose vision and leadership restored national peace. The foundation on which Cambodia's entire electrification effort has been built. We also thank Samdech Mahabawata Hun Manet, the current Prime Minister, for carrying that vision forward with renewed commitment. To His Excellency Soisem, whose steady leadership as Foreign Minister guided the energy sector through reforms. To His Excellency Dr. Tina Ren, whose regulatory oversight and technical vision helped build a coherent system. To His Excellency Jim Bissett at the Electricity Authority of Cambodia, EAC. To His Excellency Dr. Onpon Minrod from the Ministry of Economy and Finance. And to His Excellency Prang Cholasa, who now carry that responsibility forward, we offer our sincere thanks. To our donors and partners, thank you for making long-term commitment possible. To the projects and of course to the people of Cambodia. A special mention to France for your early support in technical training and in building the foundation of our national utility. And to Vietnam, Thailand, and Laos PDR for the great partnership all these years. To China for its significant financial backing and technical expertise across generation, transmission and distribution, and of course rural electrification projects. To Japan, the EU for your vital contribution to capacity building and grid expansion for many decades. To Agence Française de Développement, the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank, whose sustained partnerships enable the scale-up of national grid infrastructure. To KfW and the EU for the commitment to electrification and support in extending the grid for renewables, and of course to South Korea for your role in supporting the grid development. To the families who lost loved ones in service to EDC, we honor their memory and we are forever in your debt. To the broader leadership, management, and staff across government, utilities, and regulatory institutions, this achievement reflects your persistence, your principles, and your care for the public good. It is because of your efforts that this story exists and continues. To the student here, the next chapter belongs to you. To ask questions, to find your place, and to imagine what this story could become through your work, your ideas, and your values in the future. And to everyone here today, thank you for being part of this moment. Thank you. Last but not least, to my fellow Cambodians, thank you. For decades, you have voted for peace and development. Without your support and your patience, none of this would have been even possible. It is easy to measure progress in numbers, but there is also progress that cannot be measured so easily. The trust people place in institutions, the sense of inclusion they feel, the belief that they are part of a shared national project. These records we present today in the book, the exhibition, and in the film bring those deeper forms of progress into view, showing how electricity reached homes and how public service has reached people. In preserving these stories, we honor the past. As we move forward, we remind ourselves what public service can achieve and prepare to carry that spirit onward with integrity, understanding, and renewed purpose. I thank you all for being with us this morning. Thank you.